Hey everyone, today is Tuesday, December 19th, and this is the first of a half a dozen Zooms that I plan on doing today to discuss the, I'll just say, debate that was held yesterday at the UK Parliament. This is an open forum. If people would be kind enough to hit the reactions button and raise your hand if you've got something that you want to say. I want to hear what you have to say. I can talk for days about this, and I will, but the purpose of this is for people to speak up and speak their mind. So anybody here, did you actually watch the debate yesterday? Please feel free to chime in.
I did.
Okay.
I did.
Um, please speak freely about whatever your opinions may be about what happened. I certainly have mine, but it's not about me. It's about everybody here saying what they want to say. Go ahead, Carrie. You got the floor.
Well, I think that Mr. Andrew Britton, he had a good debate or at the beginning, but he missed some special arguments which you have been told us before.
This is an open forum, so anybody who wants to raise your hand, please do right ahead. I'll fill up the whole time, but I want to leave an open space for everybody to speak about. Anybody else here who actually did watch the debate?
Yes.
Hi, Felicity. Please go right ahead. Your opinion's welcome. Anybody else? All right. Well, everyone is invited to speak up, and I'll voice my opinion. And please feel free to just raise your hand, and then you can have the floor. The article that I just published points out what I think was missed by what was going on here is that the purpose of the petition, which was presented way back in April, from April to October, was to have the UK Parliament vote on the amendments that the WHO purportedly, I think fraudulently, adopted. In UK law, it is supposed to be the case that the Foreign, Commonwealth, and Development Office present any international agreements to Parliament for 21 days for discussion, debate, and not to be adopted or approved, but they do have the legal right to reject any international agreements. And the Foreign, Commonwealth, and Development Office completely and totally failed to follow that required obligation to give the legislative branch of the government the opportunity to have a discussion and a vote on that document. Now, during the debate, it seemed like everybody missed the point. Nobody mentioned that the debate was scheduled 18 days after the deadline to potentially reject the amendments. Nobody even mentioned that. Okay, a little bit too late. Okay, and so they also failed to mention that it has come to be known that the WHO fraudulently adopted those amendments because they never actually conducted a vote. Nobody mentioned that. They also failed to mention that the next round of amendments that are to be potentially considered for adoption, excuse me, got a few people coming in. The next round of amendments that are to be considered for adoption in May of 2024, the deadline for those to be presented to the WHO is January 27th. And so asking for the final version of the documents that are being negotiated right now, it's understood that they don't have them ready yet. And so the problem is they didn't even ask and demand that this fraudulent attempt to continue negotiations all the way up to May.
They're talking about the meeting which was held in Britain, in the UK.
And so let me open up the floor to everyone here. That's the whole purpose of all of this. We've got a few more new people coming in. If you could all just be kind enough to mute when you're not talking and click on the reactions button if you would like to speak. The purpose of this meeting is for people to have a chance to give their voice. They obviously didn't let the public speak up during the event. So anyone who wishes to speak on the issue at hand, please feel free to click on the reactions button and raise your hand, and be happy to let you have your say. I'm sure someone has an opinion.
Thank you, James.
Who's speaking?
Jason in Berkeley.
Hey, Jason, please feel free to go ahead if you wish.
Well, on that note, simply to affirm that what you have been fomenting all this time and doing in this very moment today is putting good energy in a good direction to transform our planet in a good way. So thank you. And that the sign of the times is what, as depending on how you look at it, what happened, at this meeting is like, well, it's actually happening. But, rebirth is a difficult, messy process.
All right, so the floor is open. Anyone who wishes to, just please raise your hand and weigh in with what your opinion of what happened yesterday might be. The floor is open. Anybody have any questions? Questions are always valid contributions. Some people may or may not have seen what happened. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to raise a question.
I have a question.
Sure. Tamana, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah.
Please go right ahead.
Is this all deliberate? Because what was the point of it? I've not had a chance to watch it, but from your email, because I just know you're doing this, and so I've just come on, but I've not got up to date. I knew it was happening, but clearly it seems like there was not really a debate. So why? I'm confused.
There's a reason why you should be confused, because the way this happens doesn't make any sense. I'll try to answer your question, but then please, the whole point of this is for everyone else to ask questions and give their comments. This was the request for this debate was started on April 3rd. And the process in the UK is that there's a 6-month period to get signatures, and well over 100,000, which is the threshold, were obtained several months ago. And the point of it was that the WHO had, I should say the World Health Assembly, had purportedly adopted a small number of amendments to the international health regulations. And the petition was a request from the people of the UK, over 100,000 of them, to have a discussion in Parliament and have Parliament vote as to whether or not they would want to reject those amendments, because there's an 18-month window of time where any amendments that have been adopted can be rejected. It's a very backwards way. It's different than what most people might think of how something like this should work. When the World Health Assembly adopts amendments, it's assumed that every nation is going to comply with and be okay with them. But every nation has the opportunity in an 18-month period to formally reject them. Well, the deadline for that was December 1st. So the petition was a request by the people to do what Parliament is legally, they have the option to have such a vote. And so what failed to happen over those 18 months is the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office is obligated by law to present whatever agreements may have been made by the executive branch of the government. They're obligated by law to present any agreements to Parliament for their consideration. They're not being asked to accept what has been agreed to, but they are supposed to be given the opportunity to reject them. And so the foreign ministry basically never bothered. They never presented it to the Parliament. And Cat Smith, very early on, said very clearly, they have no intention. There's no vote scheduled. And the deadline has clearly already passed. But this is to raise the awareness that they basically broke the law, and not one member of Parliament seems to have noticed and didn't say anything. And so
that's what I'm trying to establish, was that intentional, because there is a law that's been broken. This was probably not going to happen anyway. It's only because there's been some publicity for it. So it just lends one to, is there any accountability is where I'm getting at. That's what I'm asking, what's the point and accountability, and where's this going? This just seems so flagrant and shocking to me.
It should be. And number one, I do my best to not try to guess as to people's intent.
Right.
So whether it was, on purpose or whatever, but you can judge people by their inactions or their lack of action. And the things that were said in the quote unquote debate, while they're important, the purpose of the petition seems to have been completely and totally ignored by all parties. And so the floor is open. Anybody who wants to say anything. I realize that I put this up on relatively short notice, and I'm going to have more of these Zooms throughout the day. This is a 40-minute Zoom, so it will be over in about 25 minutes. And I'll be back at the top of the hour and the top of the hour 5 more times today. So, feel free to look through the information that I've published about this, watch the debate if you want. You can always watch it, a little bit faster. The transcript is right there if you want to read the transcript. But the whole point of it is to get people's feedback. So thank you, Tamara, for yours. The floor is open. Anybody else care to have anything to say? Go ahead, Juliet.
Hi, so I'm in the UK. I listened to the whole thing, and my general observations were that the Labour Party are clearly happy to give away UK sovereignty. That was obvious. The Tories seem to be very happy to accept what the last speaker said. I can't remember what his name was, but the last speaker, who's clearly involved in, well, he's not involved in the negotiations. Civil servants are involved in the negotiations, but it would seem that he has a lead role in that. But that was the guy that spoke last. So I got the general impression that although the last, I don't know, the Tory MPs that spoke, there was about 5 or 6 of them, and they all spoke pretty well, I thought. However, nobody pushed back particularly on the things that he said. And I was very disappointed that although Andrew Bridgen did a really good speech at the beginning, that I don't know whether he was just deflated or what. He didn't challenge anything that was said by that final minister, which I was really surprised at. So like the last lady said, well, or implied, I think it is a charade. I don't trust any of them personally. I'm not saying I don't trust Andrew Bridgen, but what can he do? He was mocked in the meeting as well by one of the Tory MPs because they all hate him because he's no longer a Tory, got kicked out. Yeah, it's appalling. And what you just said before, you know, why didn't anybody challenge that? Why didn't anyone challenge, you know, the violations that have gone on to date? But yeah, I don't really know what else to say. Those were my observations. It was, you know, there was a lot of bravado and, you know, good things that were said pushing back. But I actually think a lot of it is just theatre drama. It's you know, they've made their decisions. I mean, I've written to my MP endless times about this, and all I get back is the usual drivel that we want to collaborate with WHO, and, you know, we think it's good to do so. But they're all captured, unfortunately, in the UK. All the political parties seem to be captured by the WHO, the UN, and, you know, and the WEF. And I'm sorry, that's a very depressing observations and feedback from me, but I'm just being honest about my take on, you know, what I heard and what I saw yesterday. That's it, really. I don't really know what else we can do.
Thank you for that. My understanding and my weakness is names, okay? But I believe the person you're referring to was the health minister, and so he was sort of speaking on behalf of, and this is one thing that I want to really try to get people to be very clear on. The executive branch of government, every nation has a different level of authority over international agreements. In the United States, you know, we look to the Senate to give 2/3 of consent. In nations like Canada and Australia and New Zealand, the parliament has zero authority over the decision making in terms of getting into any agreement. But in the UK, it's split in the sense that the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office is supposed to present to Parliament for 21 days any agreements, and Parliament is supposed to discuss and debate and then vote if they wish to reject whatever the executive branch has done. And so the missing piece in everyone's awareness, everyone's focused on, oh, the WHO is going to take away, you know, sovereignty. The bigger issue is, has the democratic representation within our governments been shredded? And so kudos to Tess Lori for putting in the petition and 100 and some thousand people for signing it. The representation of the will of the people was nearly non-existent. There's 600 and some members of parliament. And somebody that I spoke with yesterday noted that on the petition website, there's a place where you can click and it shows a map. And the map shows every single district, you know, every member of parliament district. And there were hundreds of people in every single district. And 600 plus members of parliament didn't even show up to represent. That's the problem I'm trying to get people to focus on. If you want to speak to that, please go right ahead. And if anybody else has anything that they would like to say, please do, you know, raise up.
Just say quickly, James, I agree with everything you've said. And I think it's a very sad state of affairs that, as you know, even as an American, you know, that we've got, you are American, aren't you? So, right, okay.
I'm in California,
that we have 600 plus MPs in the UK, and that was the presentation yesterday. That's how many care. But this has been exactly the same throughout the last 3 years, everything to do with the pandemic. And that, again, was my other observation from yesterday, that, you know, clearly MPs have very short memories, and they wanted to, you know, pursue that theatre as well in that forum. I think that unfortunately the UK Parliament has been bought and paid for. It's very difficult to know what to do next. And if, as you say, they didn't even challenge you know, obviously the violation of the, well, everything that you've just said. I won't repeat it all, but it's very difficult to know what to do. I think that, I mean, there's 55 million people in the UK, and just to have a petition which only had what 100,000, yeah, that's great, but you know, 55 million people in the UK, it's not very good, really, is it? That only 100,000 thought that it was the right thing to do to sign that petition. They just don't care, James, I'm afraid. So
one of the things with that specific petition system is once it gets over 100,000, people go, oh, okay, it's got enough. It doesn't have to drive to get millions and millions. But yes, it is difficult to get information through. The same type of thing happened in Canada. They only need 500 signatures in Canada to have a petition, and they got almost 19,000. They got 55,000 in Australia and 20-some thousand in New Zealand. Whoa. And so the issue, quite frankly, is why is it that our representative democratic system appears to be completely and totally broken?
Well, sorry about
that. And so the floor is open. Anybody else wants to raise their hand? I think we've got about 15 minutes in this Zoom, and then we'll come back at the top of the hour again. Anybody else have anything they wish to say? Floor is open. Anybody else have any questions?
Can I speak?
Please do. Is this Corinna?
Okay.
Please do.
Yeah, this is. I'm from the UK, and I think Andrew Bridgen didn't speak a lot because he's been lambasted by everybody, and I think he did the right thing. So the person that opened the debate did rightly to do so. Then he said his piece, and then he was letting everybody else say their bit, so that it's not just him, that they appreciate that there are other ministers who are of a like mind. And I just think it's no good as all going on about the doctors aren't listening to us or whatever. What we really need is a political party that actually represents the people, and to understand, well, to get the truth out, really. Even it's like in England where they're stopping people farming. They're paying farmers not to farm. And then recently, this week, we get this thing saying, oh, poor old the UK, we're going to suffer because we're not going to be able to have food coming in from abroad. So they're stopping us from being self-sufficient. And it's nonsense. And it's just like, why can't we have a political party who is honest and saying, right, this is what we need to do. We have got the farmers. We have got this like valuable knowledge of how to look after land and grow food. And yeah, and I understand people being vegetarians, but for those who are not, that are, you know, like looking after animals, and we always say, for us, you know, it's the sheep. We can't put, you know, sheep have to be outside. So I just think it's a bit of a nonsense, really, that everybody's been led by the nose and all this climate change and everything. And it's all the companies who are still producing plastic labels on garments that you buy in stores. Plastic everywhere. We go to a Bangladeshi company to buy all our herbs and spices and everything like that, and it's all plastic. They're plastic. The Chinese choose plastic. Everybody's using plastic, and it's just like, who's kidding who here? And the same with recycling. We know people at our local recycling, they're not recycling. Oh, we'll just throw it here. Oh, just throw it there. And it's so upsetting because they're trying to fool everybody. Sorry, that's it.
So the floor is open. I think we've got about maybe 13 minutes or so, and then this 40-minute Zoom will be over. I encourage everybody. I realize this was, relatively short notice. If you haven't had an opportunity to watch the debate or read the transcript, that's all should be available where you found this Zoom meeting. I'll be back at the top of the hour for the next 5 hours. So, feel free to come back in, feel free to share this with anybody else. But the floor is open for the next 10 minutes or so. Anybody have a question, a comment, observation? The floor is wide open.
Can I just say one last
Sure.
thing? Thank you, James.
Sure.
You're amazing. You put all the links. You sort of, you're amazing. Thank you so much.
Well, thank
You're
you.
a big help to the world, worldwide.
Appreciate that. Thank you much. We've got 10 minutes. I want to hear what anybody else might have to say. If everybody doesn't have anything more to say, that's fine as well. We can close it down early, but come back in half an hour from now, or an hour and a half, or whatever, at the top of every hour. Part of the problem is people have to let their public servants know what it is you want. And part of what they're doing is keeping everyone in the dark about what's going on. And even when they have a public debate, they didn't address the issues. They talked a lot, but I knew in advance there were at least a dozen things that they were going to just glaze over. And they did a lot of talking, and they talked about some things that were important. But what we're dealing with here from the WHO is blatant voting fraud. In May of 2022, they pretended to adopt amendments. They didn't actually have an official vote. There is no record of any vote. And we did manage to get a dozen members of the European Parliament on November 28th to send a official letter to the WHO and to Tedros requesting evidence that a vote actually happened. And no such evidence exists because they lied. Yeah. Now, yesterday was a perfect opportunity to raise that set of facts, and not a word was spoken about it. Okay. For 18 months, D. Clark, you've got the floor. I'll stop talking.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go right ahead.
Okay, great. I think the problem is with a lot of these people, they have already bought and paid for by either the WEF or the WHO. And obviously they would have to be, because who would want to give over their power to these bureaucrats otherwise? They have to be paid for.
Are you good?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, no, I heard y'all. I just want to make sure you're done before I start talking again.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Okay. So number one, there's blatant fraud that has been committed by the World Health Assembly on a multitude of levels, just even having submitted the amendments that were submitted in 2022. They were supposed to be done 4 months in advance, but they did it in the middle of the assembly, and then they pretended to vote to adopt them. And they certified the document as being authentic, but it wasn't. Now, not a single mention was made of that. For the 18 months from when that happened until December 1st, the Foreign, Commonwealth, and Development Office was supposed to have presented those amendments to Parliament for Parliament to discuss, debate, and vote to reject if they wanted. And that was never done. In my world, that's administrative malfeasance. And not a word of that was spoken. Now, in those 18 months, there have been three foreign ministers. Liz Truss was there until she became prime minister in September of 2022. And then James Cleverly was the foreign minister until November 13th. And since then, it's been David Cameron. And not one of them did the job that the law requires them to do, which is to give Parliament the opportunity to discuss those amendments. Well, that's what the petition was about. And while it was mentioned ever so briefly, the amendments were designed to shorten the time frame that the next round of amendments, if adopted, would be considered and implemented. And so while I personally believe that those changes are null and void because they were fraudulently adopted without a vote, they took more than 18 months to schedule a debate. They scheduled this debate after the deadline. Nobody even mentioned that. And Cat Smith, who was presenting the petition, didn't even read the petition. That was why that debate was happening. And very clearly, I clipped out the little video. You should be able to see it on the page where you got the link to this Zoom. She said very clearly, they don't have any plans to have a vote on any of these amendments. And they also said, and this is the part that I think everybody gets confused on, there's a complete and total difference between deciding or voting whether to agree to some international agreement. That's one thing. After it's been agreed upon, the executive branch of government then turns to the legislative branch and says, well, you have to enact legislation to implement what the executive branch agreed to. Now, in nations like Australia, Canada, and New Zealand, their parliament has zero input into the decision-making process to agree to any amendments. But in the UK, Parliament is supposed to be given 21 days to consider any agreement and be given the opportunity to vote to reject it. And that didn't happen over the last 18 months. That's what the whole point of this petition was to have that discussion and have that vote as is required by law. And not one member of Parliament raised that point of order, quite frankly. Why didn't Parliament, why weren't they given the opportunity to debate and vote? They most likely would have just rubber stamped it and it would have gone through because most people were not paying any attention. But the executive branch of government failed to even present it to the legislative branch. And that's where all of our governments are broken. In Congress, in the United States, in the Senate, not one senator spoke up and said, hey, wait a minute, Biden pushed through these amendments, the WHO adopted them. The Senate needs to have a debate and vote on it. Not one member of the Senate or Congress said one word for 18 months. And that's globally, worldwide. Peter, you've got the floor. We've got about 3.5 minutes, and then the Zoom is just going to end. So go right ahead.
James. Hi, James. I'll be quick. I've watched part of the parliamentary discussion that took place in the UK on this whole topic, and I live in the Netherlands, and we're in the same position, I guess, as everybody else is in this world.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing that you state that the legality of what happened is not even a question mark, it's basically not legal what is happening. How do you see a legal proceeding forward to let's say have a solution on this? Because if it's not legal, then there should be somebody, an attorney, I would imagine, being capable of starting a lawsuit to claim that it's not legal, and therefore this whole thing should be off the table as soon as possible.
You ask a spectacularly good question. And one of the things that a woman by the name of Sylvia Berendt has, she's, I believe, from Switzerland, has spoken of, and Philippe Cruz has spoken of it as well. How do you hold accountable members of the WHO when they break their own rules? I don't want to say who has jurisdiction. You know, what governing body, what judicial body would have jurisdiction to enforce WHO's violation, you know, enforce some sort of sanction against the WHO violating their own rules? And so I honestly do not have an answer to that question, because I think that question is the problem. Yeah. These organizations are accountable to no one. And so it starts with awareness. It seems like you've had that awareness. You're very clear on exactly the point. What Peter just said is really at the core of this. When people in the WHO break their own rules, you know, who do you turn to? Go ahead, Karen. You got the last minute and 15.
Yeah, I know you only have a few seconds, but you know my response to what you just said. In the United States, we do have a legal option to fight back against this tyranny, and it's called nullification. And the state of Tennessee and several other states were working together to make that happen. And we need legislators to stand up and say no. In the United States, the federal government is not the final arbiter of the Constitution. The states have the authority to determine what is constitutional and what is not. Neither does the Supreme Court have the final word. The states are sovereign. We created the federal government, and we are the authority of the Constitution. And that is a lesson we need to re-educate Americans and our American legislatures about. And we're doing that. We have legislation that hopefully will pass in 2024 in the state of Tennessee, Louisiana, South Carolina, to start making that happen.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll be back at the top of the hour, and